terms of the diversity of talent or skills that are needed across the sector. So we are recording this presentation. We will be making it available to other folks who were not able to attend today's session. But again, thank you all for being here with us today. And with that, as we get started, if you could, for my own benefit, since we don't have time to go around the room and hear from each and every one of you right now, please drop your name and the organization that you represent into the chat on the screen here. Again, my name is Erin Olson. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Research with Real Time Talent. And thank you all for being here with us today. So as you're going ahead and dropping your names in the chat, here's just a brief overview of what we'll be covering today. After a short introduction from Logan and the team at the Energy Center of Excellence, we'll be diving right into that Energy and Natural Resources report, which will include an orientation to the report itself, where to find the information you need, how to navigate through all of that content, an overview of the Energy and Natural Resources cluster as a whole, and then we'll dig into those roles that are only found within the cluster and those that have high interdisciplinary relationships with other clusters across the new framework. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of time for discussion and questions at the end as well. So hold on to those questions until the end. However, if you do have a burning question that's very relevant to the slides, please feel free to drop them into the chat so that I can fit those answers into the presentation where they make the most sense. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Logan.
Hey, y'all. Just a reminder, I'm the Executive Director of the Energy Center of Excellence. I've been doing this for about a year, and then I'm also the co-chair of the Minnesota Energy Consortium. So we'll flip through some slides pretty quick, just to give you some context. Zach, want to introduce yourself as a new team member?
Hi, everybody. I am new to the Minnesota State Energy Center of Excellence. I come to the center after about a decade working in Minnesota libraries. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to working more with all of you in the coming months and years.
Sweet. There are 8 centers of excellence, if you didn't know. They were established by the legislature in 2012. They're located across the state, and they serve the seven different sectors on your screen. Yeah, absolutely. And then this is our mission and values. Just a quick, to cultivate Minnesota's energy workforce and community. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this stuff with you. And then empowering equity and innovation through collaboration are 2 values. So that's what we're trying to strive for as we move through this work together. And then the Minnesota Energy Consortium, which is what this partnership looks like. So it's in collaboration with the Center for Energy Workforce Development, CEWD, which is a national organization that 80% of energy industry partners are members of. So we have strategic focus areas that are aligned through the center and the consortium, and that's why I'm sitting at the co-chair seat. And then Tim is the other co-chair with me. So Tim Borgen's on that call too. Good to go. Pass it to Erin.
Great. Thank you so much, Logan. And just thank you so much to you and the team at the Energy Center of Excellence for your partnership and inviting Real Time Talent to dig into this look at energy and natural resources careers across the new National Career Clusters framework. Again, my name is Erin Olson. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Research with Real Time Talent. I've got over a decade of experience specifically in education and workforce research. I've also had several past lives in housing and refugee resettlement and nonprofit programming work, as well as a 3rd grade teacher. And so it's been really exciting to dig into the energy and natural resources careers in demand and the opportunities that they pose here in Minnesota. And so with that, I'm looking kind of through the list of folks that are on our call today, and I'm recognizing a lot of names. So there may not be many of you on the call today that have not heard of Real Time Talent, but just in case, I wanted to do a just brief introduction to our organization and what we do. We are an employer-led public-private collaborative that focuses on providing research and tools around our labor market to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of our workforce and education ecosystem in Minnesota, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that we have the right talent with the right skills for our current and future workforce needs. And so the pace of change right now in our in every industry and practically every occupation right now is staggering. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of exciting change that's going on across current technical education, across post-secondary institutions broadly. And so, there's always something more for us to be investigating when it comes to the needs of our future workforce in Minnesota. We don't work only in one industry. Energy is not our only space. We work across every single industry and occupation, work with partners in the community-based space, as well as post-secondary education. So great to see so many different partners and longtime friends and community members on this call today. So today, our goal is to give you an orientation to a deep dive report on careers in the new Energy and Natural Resources Career Cluster, so that you might be able to navigate this report and find the insights that you need for the work that you do. I'll also be elevating some of the key takeaways that really stand out in the report, starting with an overview of high-level industry needs and specific occupations found within this cluster, and then focusing on where there are critical occupations of need overlapping with other related clusters. We'll identify which occupations also have unique needs that only show up within the Energy and Natural Resources cluster as kind of a unique space within this sector. So a couple things to just note on the outset regarding the background. I think it's helpful to recognize there are a few realities that historically have impacted our understanding of energy careers. There's kind of the so-called green job space or clean energy that are certainly a subset of careers that are referenced in context of the current technical education and post-secondary education kind of fields or clusters that relate to this. And so we face challenges around how the industry, occupation, or job titles around energy careers or clean energy careers or green jobs have been defined or understood, and which have often de-emphasized the importance of these careers, unfortunately, in our local market in some ways, because those definitions are so diverse and often not very specific. And that's despite growing demand and growing need for these careers in Minnesota, especially when we think about it in the context of goals such as the goal for 100% of Minnesota's energy being from clean and renewable energy sources by 2040 here in Minnesota. So we have some work to do if we really want to start attaining these goals. There's important work to really be defining what those occupations are to achieve those goals. So additional context here, there's a new updated National Career Clusters framework that I know many of you are already aware was published by Advanced CTE in October of 2024. And this really poses an opportunity to feature the energy and natural resources career needs in a more targeted way, providing a path to emphasize utilities and other unique energy and occupation needs in our state, as well as elevating cross-cluster or interdisciplinary career needs that are shared with construction, agriculture, advanced manufacturing, the public sector, and many others. And so with that all in mind, this report was really created to showcase some of the opportunities in energy and natural resources under this new structure. So as Real-Time Talent was building its first analyses of this new cluster in this updated current technical education framework at the national level, it was great timing because Logan approached us and asked if we'd be able to produce a report that would take this deeper look at the career cluster using that standard national framework as a foundation for exploration. And so as we talked further and our research team consulted directly with Advanced CTE and other local current technical education consortia here in Minnesota, the report really took shape as a reference guide for educational administrators, leadership, but then also the general public to really understand the implications and opportunities of this new national career cluster framework for energy and natural resources. So we were particularly curious to dig in to how this new framework positions defining clusters by both industry and occupation definitions. This is one of the big differences, but for those of you that are familiar with the prior career and technical education career wheel, the CTE wheel, as some of us kind of lovingly call the prior framework, this one has some pretty significant departures from that. And so where you may have been familiar with kind of like 6 career fields and related career clusters, the new framework gives us 6 cluster groupings and 14 unique career clusters here. And within that, there's actually 72 subclusters. So replacing that pathway component with subclusters, which fall beneath each of those 14 career clusters. And so this gives you a sense of what that overarching structure is to the new framework. And within this, you'll see under the green cultivating resources cluster grouping, agriculture and energy and natural resources. And that energy and natural resources is where we're really focusing today. And it's a brand new cluster. There was not a cluster that was for these specific occupations previously. It was actually a pathway within agriculture, food, and natural resources. And so this new model elevates out these occupations in a way that is quite different from what we've seen in prior models. So to kind of give you a little bit more context on this, this is a kind of a blowout or a closer look at that cluster for energy and natural resources and the subclusters, or what we used to call pathways within energy and natural resources. Overall, these careers span everything from traditional and renewable fuel production, power generation and energy conversion, utilities, to environmental preservation, ecological research, and resource extraction. So there's quite a broad range of types of careers that fall into this cluster. And it is also related to many of the other clusters that are in this new framework. And so you can see how we have kind of on the right-hand side, interdisciplinary careers listed out with those 2 gray buckets. Cross-cutting careers are a unique new way that 3 specific clusters interact with the updated National Career Cluster Framework. These are actually clusters that overlap with every single industry that shows up on the new Career Cluster Framework. And so those occupations cross over with energy and natural resources, but also with every other cluster that is within the framework. And so in the report, we actually call out the careers in demand in those cross-cutting clusters as they relate to energy and natural resources in a unique way. There are also related clusters that have a lot of overlap in their core occupations between energy and natural resources and each of them. So for energy and natural resources, the 5 related clusters where there's significant overlap include agriculture, advanced manufacturing, construction, supply chain and transportation, and public service and safety. And that's mainly to say that there's going to be a lot of cross-pollination, and there will be a strong relationship within any programs of study that exist in those clusters, that there should be overlap because there are many shared occupations that those industries that are aligned to those clusters have similar needs for. And so tailoring programs representative for the ability for talent to make those career pivots and develop skills that are transferable across those clusters is particularly important. And so what's really kind of important as a takeaway here, just generally speaking, is that there is overlap. Obviously, I've said that a lot already on this slide. There's overlap in the occupations that are counted in each of the 14 clusters across the National Career Cluster Framework. And that overlap is very high between energy and natural resources and the related clusters and cross-cutting clusters on this screen. And so there would be double counting if we were to list all of the employment in each of these clusters side by side, because there's significant overlap. And so what we've tried to do is, wherever possible, we've broken apart into detail where those overlaps exist and tried to be really explicit about that. But with the nuances in this framework, there's a lot of detail to wade through. And so our goal today is to give you the tools you need to find the information that is most relevant to you and most helpful for your work. So I'm aware that in a prior presentation, perhaps a couple months ago, you had Christy Kelly join you as a keynote to do a presentation on the energy and natural resources cluster nationally and the new framework. So I won't give you a whole lot more detail kind of in the weeds on that framework, but I wanted to lift up again kind of some of the key details here on how we leveraged labor market information to quantify the demand and the talent supply in this cluster. So we use data from Shimura Jobs EQ to model the current employment and forecasted future demand by each cluster. And we looked at it from both an industry and an occupation perspective, true to what the National Career Cluster Framework currently established at the national level. And that draws on multiple public and private statistical data sets and is able to model it forward to be a very real-time and current estimate of the employment and the wage situation at the occupational level. So that's the foundation of most of the data here. In some cases where we've looked at job posting data, so where you'll see places that I've featured skills in demand, employers hiring, that data comes from our Talent Neuron data tool, which aggregates job posting data from millions of online job postings nationwide. We filtered that down to just postings live in Minnesota over a 12-month period. And then we also have some data in the report on educational awards. That's from the NCES IPEDS data. Some of the visuals you might see are borrowed from our Lightcast data tool that we leverage in-house. So we also introduced some new language as we go through this report, which I want to introduce you to because there is so much going on in this new National Career Cluster Framework. So we, to kind of just highlight those for you, interdisciplinary occupations are those roles that are found in related industries to energy and natural resources. So for instance, these industries are the utilities and our natural resources management industries. So NAICS 21 and 22, if that speaks to you, and would be those core occupations in a related cluster. So those interdisciplinary occupations, like in a related cluster, would be something like a general operations manager working at a utilities company, for instance. That would be what we might refer to as that interdisciplinary occupation. Or from a cross-cutting cluster occupation, it might be like an IT professional working at a mining facility. Those are those kind of two examples of interdisciplinary occupations that we might encounter where it's maybe they're not core occupation for energy and natural resources, but absolutely it's an individual that's employed in the industry in a role that has been aligned to management, IT, or construction, let's say. Core occupations may be employed in any industry, but they've been identified as occupations that are considered energy and natural resources occupations. So these are, we'll kind of spend most of our time talking about the core occupations because they're so very clearly aligned to energy and natural resources. So these are those roles that show up as like, it checks the box, it's considered an energy and natural resources career, whether or not that individual works for a utilities company or perhaps they work for the city government, but they're working in an energy or a natural resources role, say as a waste management professional or as an electrician, for instance. So it's industry agnostic, but that role itself classifies as an energy and natural resources career. So I'll go over that again. If it didn't make sense this time, hopefully by the end of today's presentation, when you see it in the report, you'll say, oh, yep, I heard Erin say that. She explained that to me. Again, if you have any questions as I'm going through, please feel free to drop them in the chat. After this brief orientation to kind of where some key things are, use cases, page number by page number, I'm going to be jumping right into some of the findings. So don't worry, we are getting to the findings in less than 2 minutes here. So in case you haven't opened the report yet, that Logan linked on your screen, feel free to go ahead and do that. It's okay to have two screens open. I won't be offended. Um, just to give you a couple of use cases to help you navigate the report. First of all, some of you are probably just hoping for the big picture. You just want to see, how many people are working in energy and natural resources. What are the industries? How many people work in those industries? I've given you a list of pages 7, 8, 9, and 14. Those are the 4 pages you need for the big picture of what's going on in this cluster. Page 7 will give you a core industry view into the utilities industry and our natural gas and oil, et cetera, industry combined and split apart. We'll get into that in a moment. And then the other pages will give you more of that core occupational view where it's the jobs themselves of feature. Then for those of you that maybe represent other centers of excellence and are looking to strategize around opportunities for program coordination and collaboration across multiple clusters in this framework, you'll probably want to focus on pages 79 to 92 in particular. Each of you should have, I can't remember how many pages now, but maybe 3 or 4 pages for different cluster overlap, where we outline the interdisciplinary clusters that are closely related to energy and natural resources. If you want the high level view of that, page 10 gives you that look at the education and training requirements of the top occupations by total employment in energy and natural resources, which also maps back to those related clusters. So you might find that helpful as just a context piece for matching things back. Another use case, maybe you represent an energy or natural resources program at a college or university, and maybe you want to know if the occupations that your students might work in when they graduate are only aligned to energy and natural resources, or maybe they're aligned to some other cluster, and you want to think about positioning some of those career paths for your students. So for a list of the occupations that are unique to energy and natural resources, you could look at page 11 for that high level view. And for a more detailed understanding of talent demand, supply, and program completions by each of those subclusters within energy and natural resources, such as the renewable energy space, you would look at pages 16 to 77, where we drill down into those subclusters in a lot of detail. I'd like to give a special call out in particular to page 17 in that, where you can find the detailed information region by region on average annual wages and how concentrated careers are in each of those regions, which is just really helpful information for students overall. It also gives a look at that with an eye to cost of living and purchasing power for the MSP Metro, Greater Minnesota communities, and rural Greater Minnesota, kind of pulled apart from urban Greater Minnesota. So a little bit of distinction there too, if you want more of that regional view. And then finally, if you're interested in understanding what types of industries and businesses have need for energy and natural resources talent, take a look at pages 12 and 13 in particular there for kind of that deep dive. All right, and so next I'd like to kind of give you the first content slide here. And this comes from page 6 in the report. If you're following along live in the report itself, I've tried to include where I pulled the graphics from in the report in the footnotes on every slide, just to map it back for you. And so at the very macro level, the energy and natural resources career cluster is comprised of 87 core occupations employed in a wide range of different industries, as well as employment in utilities and the mining, quarrying, and oil and natural gas extraction industry. So it's a both and. And so if we were to combine those two together, the occupational employment and the industry employment, there's a total of over 187,000 people that are employed in roles aligning to the cluster statewide, whether by the occupation or by the industry or both. And so that's what you see on the screen here. The big green circle on the far right side is that core occupational employment. Those are people working in one of those 87 careers that are defined as a core occupation in energy and natural resources across any industry. It's just over 175,500 people who are working in one of those energy and natural resources careers. And our second circle, that pie chart there that overlaps, that's our industry side employment. And so our dark green overlapping section of that Venn diagram shows us those energy and natural resources core occupation workers that also work in one of those two industries that's aligned to the cluster. And about 43% of all related industry employment is in those core occupations. So for example, this would be like an operations manager working at Xcel Energy, just to give you a really practical, specific example of what could fall in that dark green overlapping part of our Venn diagram. So going clockwise around the pie for our industry employment, we have now the orange sections. These orange sections of our pie chart represent the industry employment that are aligned to those related clusters. So on the prior slide, I showed you the 5 related clusters that were along the bottom, right? So about 35% of all employment in our industry are in occupations that are core to those related clusters. So things like agriculture, construction, advanced manufacturing, and so on. So for instance, just taking one example, about 1% of all inspectors, testers, sorters, and weighers are employed in energy and natural resources industries. Although this is an occupation that's core to our manufacturing cluster. So it's only 1% of all employment is in those industries, but it's really important to that 1% of energy and natural resources talent. So it could be like a QA inspector. And I gave an example of Otter Tail Power. I was just looking at job postings and finding some real live examples of job postings that would kind of illustrate these examples of occupations core to related clusters, but employed within the industry, right? And so that's about 35% of all the industry employment is in that category. Now moving along to the purple pie slice, this represents our energy and natural resources industry employment in the cross-cutting cluster occupations, such as sales and marketing, digital technology, and entrepreneurship and management. So here you have your chief executives, your IT professionals, and more that are working in our energy and natural resources industries. So for instance, about 2% of all project management specialists are employed in energy and natural resources industries. But again, really important to the work in the role that they are. Might not be a large percent that are there, but 2% is actually larger than the total share of employment that energy and natural resources industry employment comprises statewide. And so it's actually quite important to those to the industry. So an example here, a project controls coordinator working at a company like Enbridge would be an example of a role that's aligned to a cross-cutting cluster, but they're employed within the energy and natural resources industry. All right, so again, as I shared before, if we consider both that occupational employment and industry employment, we've got over 187,000 people in our state working in this energy and natural resources space. And overall, these roles saw a strong recovery from the pandemic, but they're forecasting modest future growth under a changing regulatory landscape. Available local talent pools are very slim, with an unemployment rate across all occupations overall in this cluster at about 1.7%. We see them as low as about 0.5% in some rare cases, and up to around near 4% in others. As a whole, in energy and natural resources careers, we see high replacement demand needs. So meaning that we need significantly more talent as we look out the next 5 years and account for things like retirements, job changes, and other job exits. High career advancement potential with increased industry experience, rapidly changing technology and innovation, leading to expanded opportunities and changing roles within this sector at a rapid rate, and consistent industry needs in this space. So it's certainly one of the clusters really to be watching in the years ahead in terms of demand, especially in a state like Minnesota. So let's dig into some of the industry level insights. So this is just looking at those two industries that under the National Career Clusters framework are aligned to the energy and natural resources cluster. So just taking a look at that little pie, the pie part of the prior slide, for the utilities, industry, employment, and mining, quarrying, oil and gas extraction. Objectively, Minnesota has seen an increase in the total number of companies or firms in these two industries aligned with energy and natural resources. And so, you know, if you see here, there's just under 800 unique firms in Minnesota in these two industries alone. While, you know, the data that we're analyzing here today doesn't exactly tell us all the reasons why. Many of you on this call probably have some of those insights as to why we've seen growth in this space. Some of my research into this question has found that over the past 7 to 8 year period, we've seen rapid infrastructure growth and accelerated replacement of aging pipelines, for example, meaning that that there have been more contracts and increased activity in our utility sector. And in addition, the local regulatory environment has encouraged utilities to make and fund some of those major investments in infrastructure, boosting both the magnitude and visibility of industry activity. And so the number of firms in these industries expanding reflects both new utility-related companies entering the market, as well as any expansions or shifts in org structures, such as new entities being created for renewable energy projects, for instance, or breaking apart of institutions. So overall, most of the growth in number of firms has been in the utilities space, not in the mining, quarrying, and natural gas space, which has actually seen declines and instability in employment numbers, which we see kind of in the spark lines on this chart on the screen itself. And establishment growth in the utility sector actually is only slightly higher than our overall rate of firm growth in the state across all industries. So we're seeing kind of it moving in line with the broader trends statewide. Overall, industry employment is about 92.5% private employers, taking these two unique industries kind of together as one. And accounts for just under 1% of Minnesota's total employment. It's about 0.7% of Minnesota's total employment is in one of these two industries that's aligned to energy and natural resources. And Itasca County, Lake County, St. Louis County, Hennepin, and Ramsey counties are the locations to watch for industry-related employment demand, either from a local location quotient or concentration of jobs perspective, or from the volume of jobs. And Tim, I see your question here. How do industry-driven cluster groupings align with regional economic development priorities? What challenges exist in tracking employment demand estimates given frequent overlap of core occupations? I love this question, and I think that some of it will be answered as we get into the overlap section, because I have some examples that hopefully we can kind of use as a discussion point. So I'm going to save your question for when we get into the related clusters section. So thank you for that. All right, so now we've just taken a look at the industry side. Let's take a quick look at those core occupations. So again, these are occupations of employment in energy and natural resources, but they could be in any industry at all. The firm that they work for might not be a utilities company, for instance. It might be a government employer or a manufacturing company, but they're hiring talent that is in a function, a job function that is considered energy and natural resources based on this framework. So as I previously stated, unemployment is very low across these occupations. We only have about 3,000 estimated skilled and unemployed energy and natural resources professionals across all 87 of those occupations core to this cluster that are looking for work right now. We've seen also fairly consistent growth, an average annual growth rate of 1.6% on average annually over the past 5 years is higher than what we've seen overall across all occupations in our state. And the top occupations of total employment in the cluster all forecast higher than average overall growth over the next 5 years. Even though it's only 0.2%, I can tell you that that's higher than what we're looking at for our overall forecasted growth across all occupations in Minnesota through the end of 2029. Wages are also higher than our overall averages, even with entry-level wages surpassing living wage thresholds in most parts of our state. So when we compare those to Deed's cost of living calculator, these really make even the most entry-level roles within this cluster, really excellent careers of focus from kind of that career and technical education perspective of the high wage, high demand, high skill Perkins kind of checklist for potential for students. So when we drill down into the specific occupations listed within the ENR cluster, it's very clear that there is demand for workers at all skill and experience levels. In fact, just over 60% of all employment in energy and natural resources core occupations typically require a bachelor's degree, and about 11% typically require a 2-year degree. But among the top occupations by total volume of employment, many require a high school diploma and either an industry credential or relevant work experience as the baseline requirements for those roles. And you can see here that the middle 3 of the top 5 occupations in the core of the cluster by total volume of employment all fall into this bucket of not requiring that formal post-secondary degree, but seeking relevant experience or industry credentials or formal on-the-job training. All 3 of these also overlap with core occupations in either construction, advanced manufacturing, or both, which is signaled here on this slide by the corresponding colored circle on the table. And I've left kind of the key at the bottom for your reference too. You'll see this throughout the report, kind of this callback to the color coding of the career cluster framework itself to help show where that overlap exists. And so for in the case of the third one on this list, supervisors of mechanics, installers, and repairers, you can imagine how this is a core and essential occupation for energy and natural resources, but also for advanced manufacturing and construction, and that there's a high degree of overlap in skill, knowledge, and abilities for each of those industry applications. And yet there is some nuance and opportunity for tailoring educational experiences and on-the-job experience unique to each of those sectors. But there's a shared need that is here, and that quantifying it collectively in that overlapping way is better from a workforce planning perspective and helpful from kind of an economic development lens as well for cross-industry needs. Thank you for your comments, Sarah. I appreciate the note, and we'll send you the link afterwards as well. All right. So if you wanted to dig into this information in more detail, the full table with this data is on pages 9 and 10 in the report. And the top interdisciplinary clusters that have the most overlap with these core occupations are advanced manufacturing, public service and safety, and management and entrepreneurship for kind of the top occupations of highest volume of total employment. Okay, so another interesting dynamic of the employment patterns of energy and natural resources core occupations of employment is that actually most of their employment is outside of the 2 related industries that are kind of assigned to energy and natural resources. And it's not totally unexpected, given that those 2 industries only account for 0.7% of total employment in Minnesota, right? So in fact, when we look at the 4-digit detailed industries, or kind of the 4-digit NAICS code level of these the industries where the core occupational employment sits, only one of the top 10 industries employing talent in those core energy and natural resources occupations is part of those 2 focused industries for the cluster. And you can see it here on the chart found on page 12. It's the electrical power generation, transmission, and distribution industry, which employs about 3% of all energy and natural resources cluster occupation employment. It's just over 5,000 people out of that 175,000 number. The public sector, which is shown kind of in blue on this page, so the top 4 on this chart, as well as the cross-cutting clusters in construction, have the highest volumes of energy and natural resources occupational employment, and should really be considered key players for this cluster alongside the industry focus. So this is just reiterating the fact that it's not industry only, that really the function of these roles necessitate that it's broader than just looking at our utilities or our natural gas and oil industry partners, but that the public sector, construction, and the kind of the digital technology, sales, and management space in particular have a lot to say in the needs of this sector as well. I'm going to shift gears just ever so slightly. And, oh, no, I must have skipped the slide here. We don't want to skip the slide, trust me. So this gives us a little bit of an insight into some of the trends we see in job postings. And there are a couple pages in the report that show job posting data, and I'm just going to show you this one as a sample. So we kind of see the reality of that, like, kind of mixed industry need, like the multi-industry need for energy and natural resources talent, really backed up in what we see in the job posting data. In addition to large energy companies certainly posting for this talent, looking for professionals in this space, we also see large construction companies, agriculture, post-secondary institutions, and government employers dominating the online talent marketplace. We see maintenance technicians, master electricians, and NOAA commissioned officers, among other job titles out there as some of the top roles that are being sought that align to the energy and natural resources career cluster. Across nearly 82,000 job postings that were advertised in Minnesota over the past 12 months, essential human skills in communication, collaboration, leadership, and planning are listed alongside knowledge areas like operations, scheduling, customer service, and project management for these types of positions. Posted wages are very closely in line with what the observed Bureau of Labor Statistics and Indeed wages are for these roles. And frequency of remote and hybrid jobs in this cluster, interestingly, is actually quite low compared to what we see in other sectors. Just 10% of energy and natural resources roles are listed online as being hybrid positions, and just 2% are identified online as remote, which is lower than what we see in a lot of other sectors. Credentials in demand are closely tied to the specific job titles within the cluster, so it's really hard to generalize what they are. Here, it gets a little cloudy because we're looking at a lot of different types of occupations, 87 different roles here in this top credential list, but you can see a CDL driver's license, OSHA certification, hazmat endorsement, EPA certification. Those are the ones that we see in the highest volumes of mention across all those different occupation types across job postings over the past 12-month period. Okay, great. So now we're going to transition ever so slightly to talk about talent supply just for a moment, and then we'll get back into demand again. So the report digs into the talent demographics of the energy and natural resources core occupations as a whole on page 14. And on that page, you'll also find age and educational attainment included. I just didn't have enough space on the slide for you to take a look at those as well. So the energy and natural resources core cluster occupations have an underrepresentation of female talent, which you can see on that top bar here. Only 23.3% of all talent working in energy and natural resources core occupations identify as female. There's also an underrepresentation of Black and African American talent, Hispanic and Latino talent, and Asian talent in energy and natural resources occupations seen as a whole. We also see that there are fewer very young and very old workers in this cluster. So interestingly, there's an underrepresentation of that talent under 25 or older than 64. So it's really that focus on the classically defined prime working age population. That's really the profile of the energy and natural resources talent, broadly speaking. And of course, there's variation occupation by occupation and by skill and experience level as well. So this is, again, generalization across all core occupations here. And now I'd like to feature those occupations that are considered core occupations in energy and natural resources and nowhere else. So these are roles that are considered, you could consider unique to this cluster, that if we were to take the National Career Cluster Framework as it is and weed everything out that is interdisciplinary or showing up double counted across different clusters, these are the ones that only show up in energy and natural resources and nowhere else. And this is on page 11 if you want the full list of the top all of the occupations that are unique to the cluster. So as I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but about 12%, or about just over 21,000 workers in 36 core occupations are aligned solely to energy and natural resources and no other clusters. So to kind of try to keep things a little clear, these are considered or referred to as essential core occupations in our report. They're the essential ENR roles that if we don't focus on them here, they're not going to show up anywhere else in our national career cluster framework. Most of the essential core occupations in energy and natural resources are aligned to the utilities subcluster by employment. But it's important to note that this is not only electrical utilities, but also water, gas, waste management, et cetera. So you can see just in that list there, we have refuse and recyclable material collectors, telecommunications, equipment installers and repairers, water and wastewater treatment plant systems operators. These roles only show up in the energy and natural resources cluster. And 8 of the top 10 essential core occupations in energy and natural resources do not require a bachelor's degree. Overall, just under 80% of all the essential core occupations in energy and natural resources do not require a bachelor's degree. So the essential core occupations are a really important place to focus for both adult workforce development and the career and technical education space, because it's that sweet spot of the high school diploma to 2-year degree needs space. And so it's a great place to really dig in and focus on what those needs are. So in this table, just to kind of give you a little bit of an orientation to it, you can see the top occupations by total employment volumes. They're in rank order from the volume of total people employed, which is pretty typical across the report. And in the farthest right-hand column, or sorry, let me talk it right through. So we've got your average annual wages, the 5-year total demand estimates, that's growth plus replacement demand based on job changes, retirements, turnover, et cetera. You'll notice that a lot of that 5-year total demand estimate, those are pretty high total demand numbers here. Typically when we're approaching that like 50% of the currently employed workforce need to be replaced within the next 5 years, that 50% mark is a threshold that I always pay attention to that signals we're going to need to train more talent to fill those needs over this time period. Followed by that, we've got our typical entry-level education, typical previous work experience requirement, and any on-the-job training as relevant. Most of these roles typically require some on-the-job training. That's sometimes a little bit of a shorthand for an industry credential, or in some cases, an apprenticeship. It just isn't how it gets tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So keep that in mind. And then the furthest right column is maybe the most interesting one. It's where my eye goes to right away on here. You can see here which subcluster these occupations are associated with and whether there's a current or future program within the Minnesota state system. So that's what that C and F stand for. If there's a C, current program, or F, future potential program within the system. So now, kind of in the spirit of exploring the overlaps too, I've also selected 2 other career clusters just to showcase, but we've dug into every single interdisciplinary cluster, all the related clusters and all the cross-cutting clusters within the report. So please dig in if you're not seeing the specific example that's tied to your area of work, your industry, or your own center of excellence or program, take a look at it. But I really wanted to showcase the cluster overlap with agriculture because there's such a strong relationship between energy and agriculture, especially in the current technical education space. Historically, when we look at the prior career wheel and some of the shifts that the national framework has placed, and they actually sit together still within the cultivating resources cluster grouping. So there's a ton shared between these 2 clusters. So again, 88% of all core occupational employment in the energy and natural resources cluster is shared with other career clusters in the framework. So there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of opportunity to explore the different needs across different industries and how different clusters can work together on these occupations and in training talent for these occupations that are shared across multiple industries and that show up as core to multiple career clusters. because that overlap is multidimensional. Each related cluster, again, has shared core occupations, and then there's the related industry employment. So we have illustrated both within this report. So on this slide, I've given you just a couple of those statistics for overlap, the core cluster occupations with that kind of interdisciplinary alignment with agriculture here. So the cluster as a whole, agriculture, has core occupational employment of just over 79,000 people, and it's facing moderate talent shortages across the cluster broadly. So agriculture actually has a much higher replacement demand shortage even than energy and natural resources. So in agriculture, about 58% of the currently employed talent will need to be replaced with new employees within the next 5 years. In energy and natural resources, it's about 41% of all currently employed energy and natural resources talent will need to be replaced. And that's not even accounting for some more informal workers or farm labor that might be historically undercounted in our traditional LMI within the agriculture sector. So the talent shortage is very, very severe in agriculture now and in our estimated outlook. So interestingly, if we look at employment of agriculture core occupations in the two kind of industries aligned to energy and natural resources, so utilities and oil industries, there are only about just under 600 people employed in agriculture core occupations in those industries. However, the shared core occupations are very numerous, especially across the conservation and land management, ecological research and development, and environmental protection subclusters of energy and natural resources. Those three subclusters have significant overlap with agriculture. And so those are shown, there's a color coding on the right-hand side that show the energy and natural resources subclusters. So architectural and engineering managers, it's core to agriculture, and it's found across 5 of the 6 subclusters of energy and natural resources. So really important to both of the clusters, and would be a great place for a lot of collaboration around the energy and agriculture programs side by side. All right, so next I'd like to give you a little bit of a feature of construction. And here I've given you 2 tables, so don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through it. In all, we have about 243,000 people working in construction occupations statewide, with about just over 6,000 of them working in either the utilities industry or the oil and natural gas industry. So much higher industry-related employment among our core occupations in construction. So really significant industry-related needs overlapping between the construction cluster and energy and natural resources. I would expect a lot of shared industry partners at tables in those centers of excellence, and a lot of shared priorities in workforce needs there. And based on our estimates of current and forecast talent demand, we anticipate high talent shortages in construction careers across Minnesota. Here, that replacement demand need is very similar to what we see across the energy and natural resources cluster. It's about 42% total replacement of the currently employed workforce in construction, which is very close to what we see in that energy and natural resources core occupations. So in the table on the left, you've got a sampling of some of the occupations that are construction core occupations in energy and natural resources industries. So maintenance and repair workers, construction laborers, electricians and mechanics, supervisors. Those are just a few examples of roles that are really important in those 2 industries for our energy and natural resources cluster. Anywhere from 1 to 7% of total occupational employment are found within the utilities or the oil and natural gas industry. And on the right, we see the shared core occupations like we did on the prior slide with agriculture. So here you can see construction supervisors, mechanics supervisors. Both of those have current Minnesota State programs and are the top occupations by total volume of employment that's shared between construction and energy and natural resources. Architectural and engineering managers and other engineers are both construction and energy and natural resources occupations, and in demand across 4 or more subclusters of energy and natural resources. Plus, they've been flagged flagged for potential future program development at Minnesota State as well. And I would think that there would be significant opportunity to be looking cross industry and for multiple career pathways, kind of from an interdisciplinary lens there as well, based on what industry is signaling here. And so I know we're coming up on the end of our time. And so to round out our presentation, I wanted to leave you with a few slides that give us some takeaways on the subclusters within energy and natural resources. So we won't go through every single one of these, but again, I wanted to reiterate the value of this overlapping lattice of clusters and subclusters, and the permeability of these career pathways or subclusters really is a strength and an opportunity for cross-pollination collaboration across programming. And so this is maybe just another way to elevate up some of the opportunities in a more targeted way. So clean and alternative energy, for instance, it's representing just over 20,000 workers statewide, just looking at those core occupations that are in alignment to these roles. And we're forecasting a significant talent shortage if ours that we need just to fill these jobs that are forecast for the next 5 years. Similarly, in conservation and land management, we're anticipating high talent shortage with a need for over 36,000 new workers to fill replacement demand needs by the end of 2029. The needs are very different regionally. So in the report, you can actually see how that breaks down for the MSP Metro, urban Greater Minnesota, and rural Greater Minnesota as well, to give you a sense of where those jobs are highly concentrated. Minnesota as a whole has a high concentration of conservation and land management jobs, no matter where you are. So take a look at the report if you'd like to learn more about these subclusters. For ecological research and development, similar to what we just saw on the prior slide, another subcluster with a high concentration of careers, particularly in the metro, and then environmental protection, while more of a low concentration overall in Minnesota. Really significant needs when we are looking at replacement demand. The last two subclusters here to feature resource extraction and utilities. These two have actually the lowest wages overall among the 6 subclusters of energy and natural resources, but even so, they're still much higher than our overall average wage across all occupations statewide. And each and every subcluster in energy and natural resources has pressing talent shortages and significant opportunities for students to enter into career paths that really advance with further industry training and further post-secondary education. And so once again, I remind you that this is your resource for you and others like you in the education and industry ecosystem. And the goal is really to grow our energy and natural resources talent pool. So please use this report to feature the opportunities in this cluster to identify areas for cross-discipline partnership and explore employer-specific talent needs. At your next employer meeting, perhaps, I would encourage you to bring a page or two from this report for discussion. Ask employers in your industry advisory councils if these needs resonate with the challenges they're currently facing to fill job openings. Ask them what their biggest skills gaps are or what the job titles are that are behind these different occupations. You may find, I can guarantee, in fact, that they're not using these occupation names when they're posting a job. They're using some of those job titles that are found on that job posting page. And so ask them, what are the specific types of engineers that you are experiencing shortages for, and use this as a starting point for conversation with employers in your network. And I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, but I am available to stay on now to answer any of your questions that you may have. I'd also like to make myself available via email or additional meeting time that we can set up outside of today to go over your own specific questions or applications for the content in this report. And if anyone has time or interest, I'd be happy to explore any of the other questions that are on this screen as well. I'd be really curious to hear, even if it's just a note in the chat, what themes stood out to you, or how might you use this information in your everyday work. So thank you again. It's been lovely.
Thanks, Erin. If anyone has questions or wants to like noodle on some stuff, you're welcome to. Erin has the time.
That's
We
right.
do. And Tim, for instance, I'd be happy to circle back to your question that you posed earlier on. I'm not sure if I answered it entirely, but I'd be happy to talk more about your specific question.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate all the information today, and I'll take you up on it. It'd be good if we could just exchange some thoughts via email. That would be great. I've got to jump at the top of the hour here, but thank you very much for the information, Logan. Thanks for making this available to us today.
Happy
And
to.
Aaron's email is in the chat, so please grab that.
Thank you, Deb. I appreciate you.
Bye, everyone.
See you, Deb. Anyone else hanging out? Anna, Drew, Amy? If you got questions, go ahead and launch them. Sweet. I'll stop the
Good to
recording.
see you, Anna. Thank you, Anna.